Welcome to our session on BRICS. I wanted to introduce the panelists here. If I can get this organized. As you know, Jim O'Neill of Goldman Sachs in 2001 started writing about the emerging markets and global economy and the role of emerging markets in the global economy, and he identified a number of countries with the highest potential for contribution to the global economy. He identified, of course, China, India, Brazil, and he was trying to come up with a term that is catchy, and he wanted to say that the future of global economy will be built by, if you start with the largest country in the BRICS, starts of course China, but if you start putting it, the acronym starts with C, becomes CRIP, and he didn't want to call it CRIP, so he called it BRIC, like brick. And then, of course, BRIC, Brazil, and Russia, India, China. Later on, 2012, South Africa was added. So now BRICS is made of 5 countries. And you're looking at the panelists. I have asked my fellow scholars to focus on each of these countries. Starting with Brazil. Immediately to my right is Professor Antonio Figueiredo of Florida International. He's Brazilian born and also with experience in Wall Street and of course in international finance. And right after Antonio is Professor Edgar Ortíz from Mexico. He has published on BRICS, and of course his favorite is Mexico, which is not part of BRICS, but we're going to hear from him. Mint. I know. He's going to say it. And then we have, of course, Russia, Professor Shachmurove from CUNY, New York, and of course University of Pennsylvania. And then we go to India. That is Professor Krishnan Dandapani, Florida International. And I try to choose people from that nationality, scholars that do work and happen to know the culture as well. And I was looking for South Africa. Unfortunately, we didn't have any South African. So I knew that Professor Parhizgari has published in BRICS. I called him and I said, Ali, would you please be South Africa? And he was kind enough, says, okay, I will focus on South Africa. With that said, I wanted you to know that because we have limited time and we have so many people talking, and we wanted to open it up, get insight from you, and especially from our keynote speaker, Professor Kidland, that is a privilege to presenting in front of him. I just wanted you to know that BRICS were supposed to surpass US, and by 2025, 2035, 2050, apparently projections were that China and India would be larger than US, and based on purchasing power, I think China surpassed US in 2014, 2015. And of course, you saw some of the turmoils that is happening in Brazil from the impeachment or the process of impeaching the president. And of course, Russia invasion of Ukraine and all the sanctions.
Liberation of Ukraine.
And liberation, supposedly, of, or the so-called, of Ukraine. And the sanctions and the challenges that in Middle East and the role they play. And of course, our focus is on the economy. Everybody says China is this, China is that, and so on and so forth. So I wanted you to know that she's going to talk about China. China is not bad. you know, we are used to 9 to 10% growth, and all of a sudden when the growth is about 6%, we are unhappy because we are used to 8%. And of course you hear it. And Brazil, we started with Brazil to my right, Tony. Go ahead and tell us, was it a coup d'etat just last Sunday, or was it a really true impeachment?
Well, I think it's something between the two, and I kind of agree a little bit with the editorial from the New York Times, where they're saying it's a little bit of a cover-up for the corruption that also exists on the right wing of the of the government.
I'm closing this so that you, if you wanted to go to your PowerPoint.
Sure.
We're going to take turns and go to our slides. And those of you who may not be following the news, this last Sunday, the lower house in Brazil voted 344 to about 200 to impeach the president. And it's interesting for everybody to probably read The Economist magazine of 2 days ago, had a special issue on 62 stupid reasons to impeach a president. And the reasons given by deputies is very eye-opening and interesting. And I know that Tony's gonna disagree with me, but that's all right.
Yeah, I just want to, before we talk about Brazil, talk a little bit about Jim O'Neill's initial report. I think there's a lot of hype right now that the BRICS are not going to deliver on their promise. But if you look actually at the original report by Jim O'Neill in 2003, he predicted that the BRICS country, except for South Africa, that was included back then, would have a combined GDP in 2015 of about $9 trillion on the path to surpassing the US by 2050, actually surpassing the G6. Today, in 2015, the 5 countries actually have a GDP of around $16 trillion. So it's actually way ahead of the projections by Jim O'Neill on the path to 2050, but there are definitely some big bumps on the road. Talk a little bit about what's going on in Brazil today. Economically speaking, it's not doing very well. We had the GDP decline of 3.8% last year. Another 3% plus decline is predicted for this year. The currency has been weakening. Inflation is rising. There are many corruption probes going around in the country, especially the one called the Operation Car Wash. There's the Zika virus, and the president is on the verge of being impeached. So none of those things are very good. If you look at the economic numbers, for the country, you can see that since President Rousseff took power in 2011, that everything has gotten a lot worse today. The GDP per capita is a lot worse. The GDP growth has gone down. The currency has been weakening, and the stock market is not doing so well. But despite all of that, keep in mind that the GDP for Brazil for 2015 is still almost twice as high as Jim O'Neill had predicted in 2003. You can see that the things really started turning bad in 2014, which was also the beginning of the big political probe. If you compare Brazil to other BRICS and the Mint, which is Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and in Turkey, you can see that since the financial crisis, all of the countries have slowed down in terms of their growth. I guess the exception there is Mexico. The political situation, I think, is what's getting a lot of the attention, right now in Brazil. The president, as Dr. Shachmurove said, got the vote for impeachment in the lower house. So now it's going to go to the Senate, where the expectation is that they will also, vote for her to be impeached, which would mean that she would be forced out of the office for 180 days during a final, investigation. So there's political gridlock, in the country, and many of the elite in politics and business have been implicated in all kinds of corruptions. Surprisingly, in terms of taking bribes, President Rousseff has not been so far implicated in that. There's a lot of talk about is it really an impeachment or is it a coup? Is the right wing or the other party trying to take the presidency away from President Rousseff? The bottom line is that she's still extremely unpopular. There have been many protests around the country against her. Her approval rating is less than 10%. President Lula still has approval rating of about 57%, even though he has not been a president for about 8 years. The main accusations against her, which are the basis for the impeachment, have to do with her doctoring of the public finances accounting in order to hide the true budget deficit for the country, especially ahead of her re-election in 2014. One of they're trying to compare, when they call it a coup, compared to what has happened historically in Brazil. There was definitely a military coup against President Goulart, who was the last leftist president in Brazil before Lula took power. And back then, Congress did not want to recognize him because actually he was not elected. He took over after the president, he was the vice president, resigned. And they were actually afraid of his left-wing tendencies, and that kind of was his downfall because a lot of people turned against him. President Collor in 1992, also he was really impeached, and that one had to do with economic situation, again, hyperinflation, and a lot of corruption accusations started by his own brother. So what lies ahead for Brazil? I do think that the vote in the Senate is going to be for Dilma to be impeached. The Vice President Michel Temer will take over when that happens for 180. Actually, he took power today for a couple of days while Dilma is in New York speaking at the UN, but she'll be back on Sunday. The head of the lower house will be the next one in line to take power, but he is a lot more corrupt than I think either Dilma or Michel Temer, and the population polls show that 60% of the population would like both Dilma and the vice president that's about to take over to be out. It's unknown if there's going to be any major protests by the supporters of the Workers' Party, which is Dilma's party, and regardless, I think it'll be really difficult, at least in the beginning, to pass the necessary economic measures, such as cuts in government spending, the overhaul of the Social Security and the pension systems, and to have more flexible labor laws. So I think in the short term, it is going to continue to be challenging, but I think the future is still quite promising. Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world by land mass and population. It is energy independent. It has a diversified, economy. It is a major, commodity powerhouse, and a lot of people are already beginning to talk that perhaps commodities, are bottoming or have, bottomed. There's tremendous internal, growth potential, and I think if China recovers a little bit, it also help to bring Brazil back up. And you can see the stock market in Brazil has already begun to rally ahead of the expectations of the impeachment and the beginning of the turnaround.
So we go now to on Russia. And
Dr. Ortiz is
Dr. Ortiz, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Edgar. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this panel. And I would like to stress that for me this is a homecoming, because I participated throughout the years in this organization, but because of many activities and changes in Mexico's higher education, I was unable to participate some years. But I see some friends, and I see then some new friends this time that I am able to come back. And as I said, it's a homecoming to me. I'm also like to perhaps also stress again, he said that he was happy to have in this meeting people as old as him, with the experience he has and so forth. And I fastly replied that I am older than him. And that's true, because to my students, for several reasons, I tell them that I really was born in the 18th century. But anyway, I agree with all the Tony's remarks. And then the question is that perhaps from the questions you give to the panelists here, that we have to answer is two. In the first place, will the BRICS really recover and become a first world power in economics and politics in the world? Because that was part of their of this initiative to get together and to even be a stimulus for the development for the developing countries, with a new look from support from the BRIC countries to other less developed countries. And then the question related to that is, will Brazil be able to recover from the crisis it has now, the turbulence, and will be able to become the leader in the world that especially the Latin American countries need to overcome stagnation. And perhaps to sum up in some other way what Tony said, is then first I see this problem from Brazil as another expression of Latin American politics, and especially corruption. Like he already said, both the right wing and the left wing are corrupt, and the same is in Mexico. Mexico in a different way, because, for instance, corruption, besides the corruption of the government's officials and all the stealing they make from the public budget, there is, of course, lots of connections, although it's denied, with the drug lords and with the drug problem. And there is also problems because of not only the political party PRI is again in power, and we hope that we won't have another 71 years of a ruling party like we had before. But anyway, like I was saying, is I see there the Brazilian experience like another experience of the Latin American corruption and mismanagement of the economies. We had not only in Brazil that kind of experience, but also, you know, in Argentina in the 1930s was almost the first power. In the end of the 20th century, they believed they were already one step closer to be a first world country under the Menem administration, but then they were undergoing a very severe crisis. And the same is in Mexico. We have stability, but what many people call is a fiction stability, because we have many problems in human rights, many problems with the drugs, many people that is disappearing, many problems in human rights. And that's really all over in Latin America, with their own expressions. In Mexico, perhaps a little bit is being stable, but it's fiction, like many people say. And that's because we have really, although all the opening that we have had, we have an authoritarian government. And even it's changing from what was becoming a more democratic, more open government to another centralized government and very autocratic. But anyway, they're able to have a good facade showing to the world. Comparing then what would be with Brazil, then Mexico has been also stagnant for the last 10 years or more. around a 2% growth every year. So it's a stagnant economy, and we haven't had inflation, but what that would be in economic terms, the difference with Brazil. In the last few years, Brazil has a stagnation and some increase in inflation rates. In Mexico, what we have is a stagnation and deeper social, of course, inequality. But anyway, responding to the question of whether Brazil will it be able to recuperate, I would say it will take more than what we call a medium term in terms of a full recuperation. Like Tony already said, an immediate recuperation will not be, won't be able to really turn back the country to growth or to the leadership it had in the last decade. And many measures won't be able to take. The opposition, the right wing and the left wing, both are populist and both are corrupt. And the people in general, like some friends say and stress, the Brazilian people, whether they belong to the right or to the left, there are very nice people, cheerful, but also very passionate. And many times, of course, they don't care about politics, because we all, in all Latin America, we're disenchanted with the political parties. I don't know. I don't feel really positive about what's happening in Brazil. I don't feel positive about what is happening in Mexico. But thinking about Brazil, what happened last Sunday, I do feel bad. But fortunately, on one side, it was not a coup staged by the military, which we have had many experiences in Latin America, and which have turned to be very, very bad, and of course with losses of lives of many people. But was really what happened throughout the last few years, and then last Sunday, democracy was a coup state through the democratic institutions, but democracy. And the way the law chamber people there, the deputies, behaved during the votation, it was really ridiculous. They were claiming not corruption really of the president, Dilma Rousseff, but claiming something about God, something about the family, something about cleansing the government when they are themselves corrupt. So I think from the democratic point of view of what it means Latin America to develop, what it means Brazil, I think it was a setback what happened last Sunday in Brazil. Fortunately, as I say, at least that there is not a coup d'etat like in other countries. The same will be like in Mexico. We don't have a coup d'etat staged by the military, but the military are very strong behind the president, in this case Peña Nieto, and all the corrupt and mismanagement of the economy he has. The richest people in Mexico are the politicians, and every time you're hearing about the properties they own in Miami, in New York, in Chicago, in San Diego, and then acquired with the money from the poor process. The same is also in Brazil. The same is also in Argentina. A little bit we know, for instance, in the last few days, because of the famous Panama Papers. And then something gets to be known, but nothing really happens. The people are dissatisfied with everything. Some changes we wanted, for instance, since we're disenchanted with political parties, to have independent candidates. but independent candidates, they really belong to the old corrupted parties, taking another facade of independent and neutral and so forth, so no changes. What I expect for Latin American in the future, it would be more stagnant, more autocracy, and perhaps in the long run to open, because there is opening. There are improvements in sometimes because of we are in the global world, and we have, of course, an eye of the United Nations and some international organizations on our politicians, our politics. Perhaps there is hope in that way, that we will have more participation from the people, and we will have to that an opening in democracy, and then that will be also an opening for economic growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Professor Shachmurove is going to talk about Russia.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and talk to you. I'm going to talk about Russia. About 10 years ago, we were in Brazil. We had the same session about BRICS, and at the time we were all optimistic. But if you go back to what I wrote about Russia, I looked at it a few days ago, and it's the same, right? Authoritarian regime, high inequality, everything depends on commodities. 10 years ago, price of oil was very high, and as a result, everything rose. So let me go through my presentation as quickly as I can, and the moderator will stop me wherever he wants. So here you can see the projection in April 12th of the IMF, and you can see Russia. Right, and you can see the number, and it's negatively going to go in the next year. We'll talk maybe later about the future, but just to give you an idea for the world, it's going to increase by 1.1, and as you can see, Russia is in the red. Here is Russia. Russia is a very big country. Russia is the largest country in the world in terms of area, but unfavorably located in relation to major sea lands of the world. Despite its size, much of the country lacks proper soil and climate, and so on and so on. So there are many objectives, forgetting about the authoritarian regime and so on, just from economics point of view, it's very difficult to develop, and there are a long way to go in this respect. Again, you can see the population. We're talking about 142 million individuals. You can see that the population median age is about 40, right? So that's a young population, relatively speaking. You can see the population growth rate, which is negative. So again, all of those are issues that Russia is facing. Labor force, about 75 million. Unemployment, relatively low, right? 5.4%. Again, we should trust these numbers rather than saying no. But as you can see, unemployment of the youth, it's about 14%. So that's the problem that Russia is facing in other countries in Eastern Europe and Central Europe, where unemployment of the youth is really amazingly high. Independence of Russia, so we go back to this 1991. Here I'm describing, again, going back to 10 years ago, Vladimir Putin was also around. So it's very clear that this is an authoritarian regime, but still doing what is good for Russia, including recapturing or whatever, invading Crimea or liberating Crimea from Ukraine. Again, they are just playing, seats from Medvedev goes on and Putin comes in and so on. The next election will be in 2016, so we are talking about an issue. Again, I have an economic overview, and it's very clear that the Russian economy depends on resources, right? On oil and others. Here is the GDP. The real growth of GDP was negative in 2015, and as we saw the projection for next year, it's also negative. But I am relatively speaking optimistic about the future of Russia once the price of oil and the other commodities will go up, if it will go up. So again, you cannot predict a lot about commodities. You can see that the inflation rate in 2015 was very high, 15.4%, and interest rate is very high, and commercial banks lending is about 16% since December 2015. Exchange rate, as we all know, because of the invasion to Crimea and so on, as you can see, in 2011 it was 29 ruble to the dollar. Now in 2015 it's 61. It went up to 80 rubles per dollar, and the way to stop it was to send few members from the central bank sitting in the commercial banks and just watching who are the people who are exchanging rubles for dollars, and of course this stopped. At the minute they showed up, no one was willing to risk his life or risk his economic life in order to be there. Here you can see the ruble pair. You can see the devaluation of the ruble. Here you can see the devaluation of the hryvnia, which is the currency of Ukraine. So you can see that Ukraine suffered much more. Ukraine supported by the West, quote unquote, suffered much more as far as their exchange rate, as far as their economy, relative to the Russia. So sanctions, as far as I'm concerned, don't work, contrary to what you read in the newspaper. The only thing is, again, they depend on oil, and you can see what is going on. So this is like just the ruble versus the hryvnias, just to show you that the ruble is doing better than the hryvnias. Here is the Russian yield curve, so that's very interesting because, as you can see, people are expecting that the yield curve will go down, or it's a reverse. This just means that the economy is going to do better, right? Going back from 11 or 12% interest rate to low as 9%. And again, some people claim that this will lead to recession. I, again, disagree, and I think we are not moving in this direction. Once again, price of oil, everything else equal, the price of oil is the issue. So again, the Russian economy depends on natural resources, and all of them, unfortunately, went down dramatically in the next 5 years. So look at the crude oil. Okay, that's the price of crude oil in the last, since 1946. If you look in the last 10 years, you can see that the price of oil went down dramatically. If you look at the last 5 years, this is our picture of Russia. Once you understand this picture, you will see that it's true for every other commodity. And in my presentation, you can see last year, for example, it's moved from whatever the levels you see there to the level below. It's not going to recover soon. So again, that's an issue. If you look at natural gas, look at the natural gas since 2008, you can see how it's dropping dramatically. Okay, so again, this is the last natural gas in the last 5 years. This is in the last year. So that's the natural gas 10 years. And you can see that it dropped dramatically. This is last year. So no matter where you are, right, once you rely on oil and you rely on the natural gas for your export, you can see the picture. Don't blame Putin, don't blame corruption. Everything is there, nothing changed. But what really changed is the price of commodities dramatically. Look at coal. Okay? Here is a coal from 2009 to 2016. Here is the last 5 years. So if you are really exporting natural resources, like Russia is doing, this is what you have. Rare earth elements, right? Maybe in China we will talk about, the Chinese will talk about it, and in China it's very important. But the price of real earth elements that many years ago we talked about, that's the Chinese are monopolizing the market. Look at the prices. Okay, and by the way, it's in unit of RMB because that's the international price of rare earth element. But you can see dramatically how changes in the prices are. It just, how can you survive when you look at these numbers, right? How can you be, an economic advisor to Putin, where I go to the teach at the State University of Moscow State University? How can you advise him when you see these elements? Look at price of timber, right? Lumber, all of them going dramatically down. So this is my lumber, timber, steel, the same story. Look at the price at 2009 and then compare it to the price in 2016. Look in the last 5 years. Look in the last year. It's amazing. It's a shock, a real shock to the economy, right? This is what we teach in all of our macro models, right? You have a real shock that is changing the landscape of the economy. Look at the price of aluminum, right? everything is going down. Last 5 years, last year. So again, I don't want to be like dramatically speaking here about disasters. It's not a disaster given what is going on, given the prices. Okay, here I have a presentation about the ease of doing business in Russia. So you can see that Russia is number 51 out of 189 countries. So again, it's very difficult to open a business in Russia. Of course, we talked about the authoritarian regime, and someone already mentioned the Panama Papers. So we all know that one of the friends of Putin has an account of $2 billion in this Panama. And at the end of the presentation, if I will have more time, I will show you how Russia is related to other countries as far as corruption, based only on the Panama. It's not corruption, based on mismanagement, let's put it this way, or greasing the wheel, or something like that. And you can see that it's difficult to do business in Russia because everything is controlled, everything is centralized, and you can see the different criteria. Starting a business takes 41 days. It's ranked 41 in the country, and out of all the countries, if you look at paying taxes, it's 47. So the economy needs a lot of changes. I agree, but as far as why the economy is not doing as well as one expects, it has to do everything with just natural resources. Index of economic freedom. Russia is considered to be mostly unfree in this ranking. As you can see, she is ranked, or it ranks 153 out of 178 countries. So again, a decrease of 1.5 relatively speaking. I have 2 minutes, okay? So again, you can see Russia is 153, and as far as economic freedom, people don't talk in the street, people don't talk in public gathering against the regime. If you find any criticism, it's only one-on-one, exactly like Ukraine, exactly like in many other countries that we are talking about. Here you can see the countries score over time as far as the index of economic freedom, and you can see that the index shows that there are less freedom today. It's more difficult today to do it than before, but it's a phenomenon of only last year. And again, my claim is it's natural resources. When resources suddenly are restricted, are limited, everyone is starting to watch over and making sure that only his friends will get the license to do whatever they do. Okay, I'm talking here about regulatory, rule of law, market. This is the overall score over time of business freedom. You can see that it was very high in 1995 relative to 2016. So again, it shows you that, and the trend was in the last 5 years, it was increasing, the index was going up, but again, last year the index went down. You can see the trade freedom here, fiscal freedom, government spending, monetary spending. Let me try to go in the last minute to the Panama. Here you can see in the Panama where is Russia relative to the other countries. And you can see that there are many individuals that are mentioned in this big story.
Which color is
The blue one? Should be, huh? I don't think it's
Yeah.
clear enough. So it's
Yeah, it's a short screenshot.
good.
Thank you so much. Now, Krishnan, do you want to come here?
Yes.
Krishnan,
Yeah,
will you be kind enough to make better use of the mic so that all of us can hear properly?
I will talk very loudly.
Both of them.
Was that loud enough?
Hello? Is it working?
Yeah, if you keep it close.
Is it okay?
Yeah, okay, very good.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Krishnan Dandapani. I am from Florida International University, and I am going to be talking about the India story, the I in BRICS. Historically speaking, everybody is concerned where the growth next few years are going to happen. Approximately the 16th century and 17th century belonged to Asia with their China route, the Silk Route, and even Columbus were trying to go to India. Then in the 18th century and 19th century, the global growth shifted to Europe because of Industrial Revolution, and they became the leader in the world. Come World War I, World War II, everything shifted to the United States. They became the leader in the world. So now the question is, on 21st century, who is going to be leading the global growth? Okay. Of course, the thought leader in Goldman Sachs, Jim O'Neill and company, they came out with an acronym, BRICS, that was in 2001. Some people say this was a marketing technique by Goldman Sachs. They prepare the fund first, and then they come up with the acronym BRICS. 2001, they came with BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, later on adding South Africa. 2005, they came with N11, the next 11, countries like South Korea, Indonesia, Mexico, etc. Then in 2012, they came up with the MIST and MINT, Mexico, Indonesia, South Korea, and Turkey, etc. Now in 2014, they have EAGLE, Emerging and Growth Leading Economies, etc. So the question is, where is the global growth happening, and does it really matter? If you are always in the lead, you want to know who is behind you so that you can keep a check. For a long time, we were obsessed with Japan. In the 70s and 80s and 19th, and Japan crashed, and it became lost decade 1, lost decade 2, lost decade 3. Now then the obsession was with China, but now let us see exactly what is happening with India. The Jim O'Neill and Company's 2001 paper identified the Growth Environmental Score, the GES score. This is how they were going to rank different countries of the world. Okay, so based on this criteria, the 4 economies that stood out, Brazil, Russia, and India and China, which contained, they said basically this is where the growth is going to happen, and the market share as per the BRICS, and Jim O'Neill's original study was there, and these were the BRIC nations. Now, India, Brazil, of course, everybody knows is raw material rich. And as long as there was a huge demand for raw materials in the world, Brazil's economy was running high. The same thing with Russia. When oil prices became super high, they were riding high. India has a two-sided economy. One is it's very rich in industrial mineral ore, etc. And the second thing is that much of the later development these days comes from offshoring and outsourcing activities. And therefore, this is basically the story of India. Also, the demographics was favorable to India because India is set to become the second largest, or maybe the largest, economy in terms of population, and also economic potential. In the world, the youngest population in the world, people under 40, is in India. So these were supposed to be advantageous to India, and as you can see over time, how the impact of BRICS, and especially India, in terms of dollar-denominated purchasing power as well as regular purchasing power, India was moving high, like from 2003 to 2025 and 2050, India was supposed to become the third largest economy in the world. Okay. Now, of course, China is struggling, and so the question is, will India even take over? Now, these are some of the major facts about India which are very well known. Good thing is, the macroeconomic stability, political leadership, and trade, education, etc. Recently, the trade deficit is coming down, and the central bank governor, Raghuram Rajan, was asked, what do you think of India? It is the only success story left in the BRICS. He said, in a world of blind, the one-eyed man is the king. Everybody is struggling for growth, and India is having some growth, but he doesn't think that that is strong enough to propel us to the really fast forward and take over. The world economic crisis brought many of the other competitors down. However, India survived. And in terms of growth rate, okay, 3 things they tell you: 7%, 8%, and 9%. 7% is a necessity in India, and 8% is a luxury, and 9% extravagance. And now we are focusing on extravagance. If you're able to maintain a 9% growth in India, then we could really achieve the target that Goldman Sachs had envisioned above. But there is a lot of struggles that go on about it. I will go to the last page and focus on the challenges. Number one challenge is corruption and crony capitalism. In spite of all the developments that have happened in India, every time you see a corruption story, the corruption is twice as big as the previous one or 4 times as big as the previous one. So corruption is really a hindrance to India's growth. And the second is offshoring and outsourcing activities in US and Europe is coming down. This could protect, basically a recession in the software that could affect them. And decline in energy and metal prices all over, this is like a blessing and a curse. India is very dependent on oil, and from that perspective, if oil prices go down, it is a blessing. But many of the Indian expatriates, they live in the Middle East and send remittance home. This is almost like 10%. On an average year, 10 million people are sending about $10,000 per person. That slowdown in remittances could have come, and that could affect Indian banking industry as well as overall investment in general. The opportunities, youngest working population in the world, which is very good, and relative political stability, at least the government is not going to change as frequently as in other parts of the world. And also, some of the best economists in the world are running. Raghuram Rajan, who was the chief economist at the IMF and as University of Chicago professor, and 2 of his other team members are very seasoned professionals. So from that perspective, India could be a success story, but they have to address the issue of corruption and also be aware of the other potential challenges. Thank you. Was that loud enough?
Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Sharkey invited me to attend GFC 2016. Now I introduce the comparative analysis of China and BRICS. Now more and more people in the world is worried about Chinese economic development. So first of all, I would like to introduce about economic growth. Economic growth rate in China is going down from about 10% to about 45% and 7%. But I think don't worry about Chinese economic growth. Chinese economic growth will keep middle-high speed, and economic growth rate will reach over 6.5 during 2016 to 2020, because Chinese central government, the strategy is need to reach the double income or double GDP. So must be the economic growth must be reach over 6.5%. Chinese economic development still will be huge potential. Well, I think will be bright future. Why? The reason is 3 forces are driving economic growth. The first reason is domestic market power. China has huge domestic market. There are about the 500 million middle income people. For past 10 years, Chinese people just would like to buy the house, apartment, and the cars. Now, almost Chinese family have apartment, house, and cars. Maybe something like the Hangzhou city family, every family will have the 2 or 3 cars. Then Chinese people would like to have the good quality life. They want to have the safe and quality food. They want to clean water, blue sky, and fresh air and good healthy. So more and more Chinese people just going to maybe they migration and invest in the United States and Australia and Canada. They just would like to fresh air, good quality of food. So Chinese government realize must be to take place the supplied side reform. Now Chinese central government has promoted the give a lot of good policy to support the Chinese government, Chinese companies to improve the good quality and to innovation and to transformation and upgrading. So a lot of more and more the Chinese company now uses the machine or raptor to displace the ordinary, the general, the work labor. So I think the second power is innovation power. High-tech companies are increasing very fast, and there are about 17,000 new companies each day in China now. More and more the high-tech, the small companies set up every day. Something like the Hangzhou and the Zhejiang province will set up the 100 special innovation town. Every town needs to reach the 5 billion RMB investment to improve the produce conditions. Of course, also all the traditional company face a very difficult time. Now, in last year, Zhejiang province willing to close maybe 100,000 traditional manufacturing companies, something like a pollution company and just a very low add value companies. But the new companies, including culture and finance, IT, e-commerce, and high-tech companies have really good time. Growth rate, some companies growth rate will reach 30% to 60% every year. Now I have the 7 listed company invited me to be independent board member. Something like some companies can growth rate can reach 60%. Very good. The profit is very high. So third reason is city growth power. There are 900 million labor in China. More and more Chinese people would like to work and live in small city or big city. They would like to buy apartment and a house in city. So from this the past 3 months, Chinese economic growth is stable and going up. The price of the house and apartment is going up. Something like in Beijing, maybe you need to $1 million just can buy 100 square meter apartment. In Shanghai, also in Hangzhou, they need to 3 million RMB just can buy the 100 square meter apartment. So very, very, very high the price is. I think maybe in 2020, if you visit China, you will find a different China. It's a beautiful China. Because the Chinese central government needed to put say 80% of small city must be the blue sky and air fresh and clean water. Now local government officials day in day out to work hard to close the pollution companies and change and transformation to offer the economic strategy and reform. So I think I confidence for Chinese economic growth. Don't worry about it. Now we can see the GDP, the brackets China. This is the first is China and India and Russia and South Africa. The China is economic GDP is going up very quickly. USR and current price of the current per capita. Now China is ranking 3rd place. First, the first place is Russia. Second is Brazil. The 3rd. This is for the world and the developing economy and the transformation economy and developed economy. So developing economy is going up. So I think in next 5, this trend is still with this. This is G7 countries. Is the first the United States. So I think just for the GDP. G7 and the GDP of the brackets, the United States and China is same. Is maybe next 5 years China may be over the United States. I think the economic growth. This is now Chinese economic growth is about over the 6%, but well I think will stay stable. Second is India, then Russia and Brazil and South Africa is going down is very quickly, more quickly the economic growth. G7 country. About the international trade, export of the percentage of the total world, the China is going up very, very quickly, reach about 14% of total world. And we can see the export of the G7 percentage of total world is going down, and import the China also is going up very quickly. This is G7. But I have the one question from the economic, the exports growth of going down is very, very fast, and the import growth still is very fast, and the G7 import countries import growth is very fast. So I think maybe it's a new crisis, new financial crisis, or new economic crisis is coming. Why is it going down? In 2015, it's last year, almost every country is exports growth and imports growth is going down very quickly. Almost every country is negative growth. So I just would maybe I would like to learn from you. Maybe it's why is going down so fast.
She's asking Professor Kidlin.
Yeah. I would like to learn from you. I want to tell you, it is something about the maybe new economic crisis is coming, not just for China, but maybe also for.
Stay tuned until lunch.
Yeah, just yeah, you see, G7 country export growth still going down. It's very fast. And FDI is China and India is Russia and this is FDI out forward of practice and the FDI inward of practice is going up. So I think maybe don't very worry about the Chinese economic growth, because the central government and local government and almost the Chinese company just would like to would like to promote the transformation and going and upgrading and to improve the quality of goods and service and environment. Now every Chinese people they think can be closed. The company can be going down. So I think China will be the stable economic growth will be stable because everyone just work hard and day out to promote the innovation. Something like the university, a lot of university now Chinese central government just ask Tsinghua University, Beijing University, Fudan University need to be first academic level university. Something like the Zhejiang University of Technology, our university, we need to ask every professor and doctor and the young the teacher need to do a lot of research program. Something like just my team. In next 4 years, we need to have the 25 million research foundation to promote the set up the new idea and some model. So I think Chinese economic will be good. Don't worry about. Also the Chinese economic will face serious challenge, but I think Chinese economic will be good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Last on the acronyms is of course South Africa. Ali Parhizgari from Florida International.
Thank you very much.
Close this here.
Very good. Okay.
Which one is yours? This one? The black one?
Yeah, it's called South Africa presentation.
No, this is Professor Kidman's. South Africa.
Yes, that's it.
little pointer.
Very good. Yeah, yes, I do. Thanks a lot. Okay, I got it. Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Ali Parhizgari. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. My task here is South Africa. And at the outset, I'd like to confess that I am a little bit less privileged compared to my esteemed colleagues here, because all of them had the experience to know and to be from the country that they represented. Very unfortunately, even though I've had the privilege to travel to a few countries, I have not yet been privileged to walk on the streets of South Africa to see what's happening there, to observe it. And I personally believe it makes a big difference. When you visit a place, when you spend time, then your perception, your likings, your dislikings, whatever it is, will change. Quite often things will be different. Okay. That being said, since I am also the last person on this topic, maybe I should try to see whether I can form a consensus of what we have heard so far. And then maybe at the very end of my brief presentation, I draw a different conclusion. I get a kick to see that each of my colleagues attributed some of the problems that we have to some features of the current worldwide economic problems. For example, why are the BRICS going south? Remember, I'm talking about South Africa. We're going south. They are going south probably because of corruptions, mismanagement, if I want to rely on Antonio and on Edgar. Number two, maybe due to a change in the pricing of raw material. Number three, maybe due to struggling economies who are trying to basically figure out what to do. And then let's see whether I can draw a fourth one for you. I hope I can. Okay. Now, that being said, I have a few introductory remarks that I'm going to skip quickly because by now we all have been exposed to them. But the only thing I'd like to bring to your attention is that the definition of BRICS. If a country is going to be large, fast-growing, having significant influence, etc., and etc., these are tall orders. Those of us who are students of economics of development, we have been coping with it for the last 50 plus years. I have personally been coping with it for the last 50 plus years. And I have observed that it's not that easy to switch gear, to move from one level of economic development to another level. You know, I remember early in the 70s, the so-called, I don't want to use the word, underdeveloped nations made a motion in the United Nations that the terminology was humiliating, that it should be banned. They were asked, what do you want to be called? They said, developing. Fine, it was unanimously approved. But now are they all developed? They're not. It's already 50 years down the line, okay? So these are tall orders. Now, on top of that, if we move on, let me skip this. We really have already got enough of this by now, okay? I'd like to mention a few things about the BRICS countries that were not mentioned among the discussion that we have so far. Number one was the establishment of the bank. I don't know whether I had it earlier or not, the New Development Bank. This bank was and is supposed to basically compete with World Bank. And you all know World Bank. So fine, you say, what's the big deal about that? The big deal about that is political dimension of some of these activities. Nobody really addresses it that quickly, okay. On top of that, if you move on, then they came out with CRA to manage themselves economically, particularly in terms of foreign exchange. You know, based on the experience of the financial crisis. CRA was supposed to help them in terms of, in cases of emergency. Well, then watch the last one that I want to bring to your attention. This one, SWIFT. They also moved to establish their own SWIFT system. As a matter of fact, China has already got a smaller system going on. Well, what am I drawing upon? These are all politically rivals to the major establishment that we have. My theory, and I am very modest in this, is that these will cause frictions. Others who could possibly contribute to the growth, to the cooperation between nations, feel a little bit pressured. And to that extent, they may not cooperate. They may even produce a wedge or stick a wedge in the process. Now, I'm not attributing all the problems to this, but all I'm trying to explain is that I get worried when I see the political and economic dimensions of some nations, particularly in the current environment that we have, moves in that direction. Now, let me go over a few other things. A few quick notes about South Africa. South Africa is also a little bit of a different breed compared to all the other countries, particularly because of the apartheid. You all know about that, you know. After '94, that basically the country got its freedom, there was a lot of hope, a lot of aspiration, okay? Unfortunately, things did not happen. Unfortunately, as I have mentioned for you, when things did not happen, promises were made, and there were two terminologies that you quickly read everywhere, okay? I have it for you. Cut public expenditure and increase taxes. That is how the political system, economic system of South Africa is based upon today. So how far do you go in that direction? Cut public expenditure and then, of course, increase taxes. When you do that, you do hear such words as over the rainbow. Well, unfortunate. You have going backward. You have going south, and south you go. Well, let me now change gear a little bit. Is that the first time that I am seeing a country going south? No. Do you remember the Tigers country of the 1997, 96, 98? I've forgotten. What happened to them? We don't talk about them any longer, you know. Now, let me not go through the economics and the, what do you call it, the hindsight, what happened to these Tigers countries, whatever, okay. So is that an exception? Probably no, okay. Among the ills of South Africa that I can line up for you, one is politics, internal politics. They have problems on their hand. Multiple parties, competition between them to a point that unfortunately sometimes it gets bloody, okay. Lack of education. When there is no money, when the country has come out of that apartheid period, they really need a heavy extraction in education. There are jobs available, but they cannot fill them because the educational background of the workers are not sufficient, okay. Now, global economic and financial stress, you all know about that, you know. In the global community that we have, you ask me what happened in the 2007 and 8 financial crisis, and what are the aftermaths of all that, okay. Now, labor unrest, party affiliation, preserving a status. Now, there is something I'd like to bring to your attention. There are two countries in the world currently that I can cite that may suffer from that last line that I have for you, preserving the status quo. One is Cuba, one is South Africa. They both have something similar. The similarity lies in the following. They are both respecting their prior leaders because they helped them get them out of the problems they had. In South Africa, they cannot deny the party right now. They cannot insult that party because they all feel they are obligated to that party. The same thing applies to Cuba. No matter what you want to do for them right now, they are still respecting the Castros because they believe that no matter what, for 50 years, against all the odds, these people ran a country Let's give them some credit. They did run the country. How bad and how miserable it was, that's a different story. So they respect the leaders. So they are locked in. Psychologically, they are locked in. They don't know how to get out of it. Maybe time will resolve those problems. Of course it will. Now, going back now, I'd like to walk you through some heartbreaking type of activities, unfortunately, based on what I dug into for you. In summary, if I could answer the following question, we have a multiple choice question I mentioned among all the other countries. What's the problem with South Africa? It is the fifth item, all of the above. All of the above, unfortunately, applies to South Africa. I may exclude China to some extent, but then South Africa suffers from all of the above. Now, I'd like to give you, this is a heartbreaking picture that I got from Economist for you. It's not really that much encouraging. And you see the party is flipped around, the political party that they have. Now, in terms of what I like to draw, let's see who is not in trouble. You know, who's not in trouble in that list? Maybe China is not, but all the rest are in trouble. You know, India was not, but now with the Panama paper, they're all out. So now you notice that the political dimensions is really moving things backward. Now, if I want to go back to this again, external politics and internal politics, and globalization and imbalances is probably one item that I'd like to narrow down, because under the current conditions, it doesn't seem that that notion in the United Nations of becoming developing nations fast and quick are really struggling. It's not really happening now. To show you what's happening, I'd like to give you a quick data tour. I apologize, these are coming from the public data sources that I have for you now. GDP going south. Okay. The capital formation is in blue line. I'm sorry that you may not see that very bottom over here. That's the capital formation, that is the GDP. So I have provided you about 10 years of data, so you can see the dynamics of what happened over this time period, okay? Now, let's move on quicker, if you don't mind. These are the balances of payments. The current account is basically in the top green one, as you noticed, okay? It's mixed up. I have broken it up for a better graph. These are the exports and goods and imports. Both are going south, as you notice, particularly during the last 5-6 years, going south, okay? Then the consumption expenditures, the country is getting poorer, basically. When the consumption expenditures, the government expenditures, when everything is going down, 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 that means they're getting poorer and poorer and poorer, you know. Then, let's go back to what do I have here for you, okay. These are the 3 exchange rates, am I correct? Right. These are the amount of South African currency per one of the other currencies. As you notice, the currency is depreciating, starting from here. It's all depreciating against all the currencies. So that's another sign of getting worse, okay? Then let's look at this one. These are the deposit rates, right? These are basically interest rates, right? You could argue that, well, the interest rate dropped. Yes, it dropped to here. But for the last 4 or 5 years, this is basically going up again. In an economy which is not producing anything, which is really coping with problem, higher interest rates are not really welcome, you know. So that's also going south in some sense, okay. Now, the same thing applies to the deposit rates. These are also rates that I have provided for you. Again, even though these are rising in trend, it implies they are going south, okay. Inflation is a mixed bag. I have my view on the inflation there, that it looks okay, but you may say that when there is nothing to buy, then there is no higher prices associated with that, okay? Then let's see what else I have here. These are unemployment rates, astonishingly high. And please also note the disparity between genders, you know. You see, this is for men, the blue line is for women, okay? Now, there are big disparities between unemployment, high, to the 26, 28%, okay? Then, I have it unemployment by race. Again, that is a typical problem that we see in most places, as you notice. The blue line is white. You see that they are enjoying some level of employment, but then when you get to the others, they're not. Gap is huge, okay? Then, what else do we have here? These are two, okay? These are two indices that I have for you. I cannot make really much sense, except that, I'm sorry, these are price indices. This is another sign of inflation, which is basically what it is. Okay, now, I'd like to add one note. In my view, I think political dimensions of these countries are falling into friction with, unfortunately, with the advanced nations, particularly because of the steps that they are taking. This was minor initially, but with what happened between us in the United States and Russia and a few other countries, things got a little bit uglier, you know. The first and the main movers of the bank, of the system of exchange rate, of SWIFT replacement, is Russia. They were the ones who decided to finance, followed by China. So therefore, we really have a political factor here playing its role. I am at my wit's end to tell you which one really was the main culprit to basically cause problem for these countries. But I may say that on that multiple choice question of all of the above, whether it was raw material or corruption or mixed economy, I like to add the political domain of how we are running the economy and politics in today's worldwide condition. That I think is another culprit. Thank you.
Question?
Yes.
I've got quite a few questions, but very quickly, starting with
You want to join the
Krishna.
panel and
Krishna, just each of them, in fact.
Right.
Krishna,
Okay.
you talked about corruption being biggest challenge in India, but since the new government took over about 2 years, 1.5, 2 years ago, all economists have talked about India as the one bright spot in the doom and gloom that we see. So there's a lot of hope. I think India's challenges lie elsewhere. It's opening up the large domestic market and some of the legislations which are being opposed for the sake of opposition and political maneuvering by the opposition parties. I think some of those are bigger challenges for India. In terms of China, I mean, there is a lot of talk about China.
You want me to respond to India first?
Okay, go on.
Well,
with India.
this is the actual quote I gave you from Raghuram Rajan, the central bank governor in India, when they were asking that India's prospects are very good. He mentioned that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is the king. So India's relatively, they're okay, but not exceptionally good, because other economies in the BRICS are doing bad. That is why India stands out, but he does not think specifically India is doing that great. Regarding corruption, in spite of all the measures we mentioned, still the Transparency International puts India at 84 in terms of corruption.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want.
We can have this discussion elsewhere. I don't want to preempt. I don't want to preempt it, but I just want to give you a brief answer.
I know, but Raghuram Rajan comes from a very particular paradigm, and let's not get into that. But one thing is for sure, that if you look at most of the economics data that is coming out of India, it's all very positive. There's a lot of work going on in power generation. There's a lot of work going on in the infrastructure development. the foreign exchange reserves have reached a target which has never been achieved before. The government deficits are down. So there's a lot of good macroeconomic data coming out of India, which is not talked about. But I think there's a bigger challenge for India in terms of
Go to China now.
India in itself is a very big market. I had questions for China as well. I mean, you talk about China, but one of the things that people forget about China is the huge indebtedness of some of the Chinese corporations. Because I've been reading about it. And in fact, some of the Chinese companies are hugely leveraged. Their median leverage is about 5 times, which is much higher than most other companies around the world. So a lot of the Chinese outward investment that is going on is hugely, financed through leverages. So there is a lot more. Chinese. I mean, it's well known that the data that comes out of China is always a question mark there. How much of that is really true? But that's one thing. The second aspect about China, of course, is that the one-child policy is not going to help China because China is going to go old before it gets rich. There are 126.5 million Chinese will be over 65 years of age in 2020, right? So there are those issues there about China. I just wanted your view about the huge indebtedness of some of the Chinese companies and what impact that might have on Chinese economic story.
Yeah, I think
Growth story, sorry.
That's true. Now Chinese government faces, I think, a very serious challenge. Is first of all is old aging, because a lot of more and more people, older people, will increasing very fast. But I think now, because for Chinese family, every family, they have saving, they work hard and saving a lot of money. I think maybe every, just a general family, they maybe were saving reach 1 million or 10 million, a lot of people. So all the people, all the rich Chinese people, just find the good location. They would like to maybe need to stay as the United States or America or the Canada or Australia. But the Chinese government, central government and local government, they will set up a lot of the basis for the older people to how to help them. I think will be because Chinese family, they have a lot of money to support the older people.
And a couple of more questions.
China, as you know,
And the one-child policy, now one-child policy changed to two-child policy.
I know.
So need to young people to help the older people.
the second question that you had about the one-child policy is changing. And in terms of leverage, my view is that when you have a government playing a major role in the economy, and banks are government-owned, and you wanted to make huge investments domestically or internationally, banks and leverage plays a major role. Private equity and private funds and investments in China is growing, but still the dominant role is with the Bank of China, Construction Bank of China, they are government. And what Dr. Cheng said just about a second ago on savings, I would basically question the distribution of income. We have inequality all over the world. You saw Forbes magazine, 62 people own the whole, as half of the whole world wealth. China has that distribution problem of income, and unlike US, that at least when you go to rural areas or anywhere you go, or Europe, there are major differences between infrastructure, Dr. Cheng might dislike me or disagree with me, but China has a lot of opportunities for local domestic investment in infrastructure, and they are doing it mainly.
About
I think the use for the maybe policy is the traditional manufacturing companies will be closed more and more, the traditional. Then some just the labor. The labor is middle-aged labor. Then this, so many middle-aged labor can be take care the older people, because they can stay, because for developed area, the province, maybe every family, something like the Hangzhou city, every family they have maybe 3 or 4 apartment or house, a lot of maybe. So they will invite some lose job, the middle age to take care the old people. Then for some people, for 1 month need to 10,000 RMB for 1 month. Very high price.
I think any other questions,
This
by
is
the way, on that, any of the
I think
other
this
countries?
is special.
Yes, so I
The reason I wanted
situation.
to proudly limit it to because they want to set it up for lunch, and
Sure.
then we're going to.
just quick
My,
one
my,
because
my
Professor
com-
Kidland
let
is
me
here.
tell you my comments
this is
on what Dr. Cheng said. You know, it's a dark room and elephant. That, Dr. Cheng, being rich, connected senator, and so on and so forth, sees it differently than average Chinese.
So Professor Kidland was here, so I wanted to just raise 2 more questions about Brazil and Russia, because they are heavily dependent on the commodities. And you can see what happens when the commodities, demand for commodities dry up. You can see the pressure that grows, the deficits go up, the currency is actually dwindle. So what can these countries do in order to restructure their economies so their dependence from commodities is reduced? That's one question. The last question about South Africa was very much related to the commodities issue, because South African currency has taken a beating. Most, in fact, including even Australian currencies, have gone down against US dollars, mainly is because of the commodities drying up. Yeah, so those are some of the questions. And the other thing, don't forget, is the dependence on the foreign direct investments. $735 billion were pulled out of 2015 out of the big economies, right? So $735 billion were pulled out. So how, I mean, on one hand, they are dependent on FDI, on the other hand, the FDI itself can cause a lot of problems for the economies. So what are the solutions? I was probably, and then there are wider issues about reporting standards, regulations, standard of corporate governance, and so on and so forth, which we haven't touched upon. There is a lot of material there to discuss.
We're going to put all these PowerPoints in one package on our website. And I know you're going to be the first to basically critique a lot of different, and I encourage you and invite you to do it. And then we lean on Professor Kidland and Nobel laureates to come to rescue and help us.
Yes, sure.
With that, I'd like to thank you. Let's take a break so that they prepare this room for our lunch. And we are all looking forward to listen to Professor Kidland. Thank you very much.